In this video, we're going to talk about writing literature reviews for course credit. Before we start talking about what a literature review is, let's clarify what a literature review is not. An article review is a summary of an article that describes the main points, the arguments, positions, and findings, and then provides a brief critique of what was provided in the article and how it's related to current literature. In an annotated bibliography, you're going to look at a group of related articles and you're going to provide an appropriate citation. Underneath the citation is usually a summary of the article, about 150 to 200 words, that is descriptive and evaluative of the information that's in the article. Both the article review and the annotated bibliography treat the article as a separate entity. This is distinctly different than a literature review. Alright, now that we know what a literature review is not, let's talk about what a literature review is. There are 4 different types of literature reviews. However, there are only 2 that are typically used for course requirements. The first type of literature review most commonly seen in the academic environment is the narrative literature review. This is the traditional literature review, and it includes a critique or summary of the body of literature, draws conclusions about the topic, identifies gaps or inconsistencies in a body of knowledge, and requires a sufficiently focused question to guide the literature review. A less common type of literature review found in academia is the systematic literature review, and this is more common in a master's program related to research or in a PhD program. The systematic literature review requires a more rigorous and well-defined approach. It's comprehensive. It's published and unpublished studies relating to a particular subject area, details the time frame within which the literature was selected, and details the method used to evaluate and synthesize the findings of the studies in question. For those students in Dr. Rebecca's class, we will be using the narrative literature review. A literature review typically includes a background, a review of literature, and a conclusion. However, it can also include an abstract, so check the details of your assignment to make sure whether or not an abstract is included. The background is your setup to the literature review. In the background, this is basically an introduction to the topic. You're going to tell me why you're writing this literature review, why the topic is important, anything I need to know about the topic before reading the literature review parts, such as terms or the context. You need to provide an appropriate transition. Let me know what you're going to be talking about in the literature review. The background should be approximately 1 to 2 paragraphs long. A literature review requires the inclusion of literature. This means peer-reviewed journal articles. Peer-reviewed journal articles have been vetted by their peers, clarifications were requested, it was deemed to be of good quality, timely, and relevant. If you're not able to find enough peer-reviewed literature on the topics that you've chosen, that means that either that particular topic is not current, or it's no longer relevant, or it's so very new that information hasn't been published yet. Most publications take 2 to 3 years from conception to actual publication. If you need to include other sources, be sure that they're both credible and reliable sources. This may be needed for the background, to fill in gaps, or to demonstrate that a new topic is important. A credible source is something that's vetted, like Fox News, CBS News. You can identify a particular person and you can identify their credentials. In other words, they're credible to be talking about this particular topic. Reliable means that you can find this information again. If the information is not credible and reliable, it's not a good source to use. Such poor sources would include a salesperson, a consultant, a blog, or Wikipedia. There are other poor sources, but these are some of them. Let's talk about peer-reviewed journal articles versus books. We know that peer-reviewed journal articles have been vetted, so that information has been deemed to be of good quality, timely, relevant, and reliable. A book, however, is published by an individual and it's not necessarily vetted. There are times when books have information at the front of the book that tells you who the author had vet the information, but it's not typical. Therefore, books are not usually included in a literature review. The exception may be an author who is so well known on a topic and has developed a reputation that they are deemed credible despite it being a book and not a peer-reviewed journal article. A literature review should provide a logical organization of concepts. In other words, you should provide headings, subheadings, and transitions from one topic to the next to help me follow your train of thought. When using headings and subheadings, be sure that you integrate your sources. In other words, don't use everything from one article and one author in one subheading and then move to the next subheading and add another article and another author, moving from one article to the next down the paper. That is not a literature review. A literature review provides a balanced perspective, meaning that you don't champion one particular perspective, but rather that you provide a comprehensive look at all the different perspectives on that topic. If you don't provide a balanced perspective, you're failing to acknowledge that there are other points of view and that in some situations your perspective may be invalid. A literature review also identifies the gaps or missing information from the literature that you found. This way we can say this is what we know about the information and this is what we don't know and we still need to research. In a literature review, you also provide a critical assessment. In other words, after reading all of this information and all the literature that's provided on this topic, identifying what's missing, what do you think about this information or about this topic? Your critical assessment can be staged at various places within the literature review, providing an assessment as you go and transitions, or you can wait till the end and provide a recap of your assessment of all the information and what you've learned. The conclusions should summarize the key points or takeaways from the literature review, and it should also point out the most important facts or points that you want me to recall after having read this literature review. The abstract is usually written at the end of the entire paper. However, it's placed at the beginning of the paper. It talks about what is going to be discussed in the paper, why this is important, and the key points to take away. This is usually around 250 to 500 words. Be sure that your assignment utilizes correct APA. That includes the layout, references, and citations. So for any reference you have in the reference section, you should also have a correct citation. That means that if you're required to have 15 or 20 references, you have at least one citation in the body of the paper for each one of the references. Also with APA layout, be sure that you're utilizing the correct margin, 1 inch all around, and 12-point font. No extra spaces between. Please double space everything.